I'm Richard Taylor and I'm here at the lovely Hitchinbrook Country Park, and I've come along this evening for a meeting of the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Foundation Trust. That's our local mental health trust, and the primary reason I've come along is to bring concerns from residents of Garden Walk in Cambridge who have been experiencing disruptive behaviour from some people who the trust place in accommodation on their street to the governing body to ask them to review how they allocate people to accommodation. There's also lots of other things that I'd be interested in to hear about at the meeting. For example, this body is responsible for the 1112 service. That's when you dial 1121 and then extension number 2 to get mental health help. And I've been asking questions about how long waiting times are after if you actually need to meet up with someone after calling that. And of course, it's just a large public body. It's responsible for spending about £200 million a year. That's bigger than the police, and it's just part of our local NHS. And I think it's right that people should every now and again come along to the governing body and board meetings which are held in public to observe what's going on. Now, this meeting, the governing council here, have some very odd rules. They say that you can't use electrical devices to record the meeting. So I'm not going to be able to do my usual thing of videoing, live tweeting and generally reporting on the meeting. So however, I did ask the chair, there's a provision in the constitution to ask the chair to waive those rules. I did ask, but generally the answer was a no, although I've been given permission to record any answers given to questions which I raised personally. I didn't ask for permission just for myself to be able to film, I asked for permission for anybody to be able to film. So one thing I'm going to do, if I get the opportunity using the public question slot, is to ask them to review that rather bizarre and silly rule. Anyway, I've turned up about 10 minutes early, so I've got a chance to walk around here, and it's really quite nice. I'm staying right where I am so that I don't fall in the water while recording video. And just to show you, this is my bag with the recording kit in it, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep the tripod and camera like that to indicate that I'm not recording until the point at which answers are given, or until the answers are being given to my questions, when I do have permission to record. This is the meeting venue, this hut here. I'm afraid I can't take you in due to their silly rules banning electrical devices for reporting. So what I'm going to do is note down anything which is interesting that I would usually tweet, note it down in a notebook, and I'll tweet it later. And I do have permission though to record the answers to any public questions which I ask. So hopefully I'll be able to come out with some audio and video of at least that. Anyway, I have to leave you here.
Richard, thank you for coming here tonight and drawing our attention to issues at Garden Walk. I've got a report back from the local authority commissioner who commissions the services there on a meeting that was held on the 11th, which is 2 nights ago, which Councillor Claire Richards, who's one of the local councillors, and members of the sanctuary team attended, and which a whole range of things were discussed around what could be done to support the situation, which I could read out to you or I can email them to you. But what I wanted to say was there was a change. We're in that limbo period between the change of provider, because the local authority, this is Cambridgeshire County Council, has just been through a tendering exercise, and Sanctuary is the new care provider who are taking over the service from Metropolitan. And they actually start the new contract on the 21st of September. And what I will do is ensure that our staff go and talk to Sanctuary and go through the support plans of the individuals that we have placed within Garden Walk, to have discussions around whether there are particular issues involving particular individuals and to work on strategies. So that is what we can do in CPFT, is, as you say, we and the placing of service users within different supported accommodation projects. What we don't do is actually run the supported accommodation project or commission it. That's what Sanctuary and the local authority do. But we all have to work together. We have to work together to make sure that we don't, that we get the mix of residents right, for example. I should say tenants, not residents, because I assume that most of them have tenancies because it's a supported accommodation project. It's not a residential care home. And that may be an issue. Sometimes the dynamics are very, I don't know if this is the case, but sometimes the dynamics are finely balanced, and if you can award a tenancy to somebody who tips the balance in one direction or the other and upsets the equanimity of the project. There could be something like that going on, I don't know. But we will work with the new provider, which makes much more sense to me than to work with the outgoing provider, to see that we can do everything that can be done. But there is this whole list of other things that the councillor and the council are dealing with at the moment, which I can read out if you want. Okay, so the range of options that have been discussed to support the situation in Garden Wall include implementing a waking night room service. So at the moment they have a sleep-in service. So the waking night means you've got somebody who's actually there awake to deal with issues that may arise. Reviewing the options for alternative accommodation for the service, as there is a saturation in Garden Walk. So Sanctuary have some options for this which are being explored with the council. Regular attendance at Residents Association meetings, which hasn't happened previously as far as the author of this is aware. Providing the residents with clear protocols around reporting of incidents and feedback. Regular open forums for residents to pop in to discuss ongoing issues. Interaction with the local community through coffee mornings, street parties, etc. And providing a named contact who will be responsible for liaison with the residents. Yeah, I wasn't suggesting there necessarily was a problem with individual residents, but I mean we would review individuals anyway automatically because we're under statute obliged to do that. But we would look into this.
Okay, I've made my suggestion.
Yeah. Does anybody else want to say?
Well, I think it is very important for us to, as governors, to, as we've brought up in previous council governors meetings, but in other forums as well, that the wider health and well-being of mental health problems. And we have referred to, I know there was talk in the, I think of the Recovery and Inclusion Board and other places that housing in general is discussed. So I would just reiterate that it is, it's an important issue for, speaking as having a family member with severe mental health problems. Accommodation is extremely important to us. But of course it is, I'm not saying, I don't mean peripheral in the sense of unimportant, but it isn't the core business as Deborah's outlined. Of course it is with the local authorities. So I do think it's an issue that governments maybe over the next year should be thinking about in the context of how people with severe mental health problems perhaps continue their recovery out in the community, and housing is an important part of it.
So
I think we would. It's not an issue we ignore, but we need to think about where where to put it in a future meeting. I welcome it, because there isn't a huge understanding as well, because you are often a bit at sea as to where can people go. And I think it would be another example of perhaps a governor taking the lead and getting to grips with that particular issue if they have an interim.
We do have an accountability to report on numbers of people on the CPA care programme approach who have accommodation, and we've got that on the board assurance framework. So we do have in terms, because of, as you so rightly said, accommodation is so important to people who don't recover.
Richard, I'm a new governor here, so that's my first proper governor's meeting. And what I've been to so far is an induction. And one of the things I've learned there is that there is a proper separation between what governors do and what the executive does. And I feel, although I'm new to this, it feels to me like this is something which is better resolved by the executive of CPFT and the Board of Governors. If some major policy needs to be reviewed, it would be discussed by the executive and then brought up to the Board of Governors, and we would talk about it then. But I don't think it's right for the governors, as far as I understand it, to get involved in something as operational as this.
That's what I was going to say. The conclusion really is that the executive are aware. They will continue to work with colleagues in the council and the new service providers to ensure that they work with residents so that everybody can live in harmony. And that's what Deborah's starting to do with her colleagues. That's why she's got the feedback for you today. And I know that as a result of meetings that have gone on, things have started to move ahead. And we will make sure as a board, not necessarily the governors, but we will keep the governors informed as to how progress is being made so that everybody lives in harmony. Okay? The other thing I wanted to say was in terms of your request for the filming of the whole meeting. As you identified, our constitution didn't actually have that in, but we are very willing to have a re-look at the constitution. Heard exactly what you said. I'm very aware that NHS England do themselves film their board meetings and they post them on YouTube. I'm not quite sure how many people go avidly watch that, because I'm sure they can take clips and things from it. Likewise, we could do the same sort of thing, but in essence we would need to make sure that we focus on the meeting and not on the members of the public, and if they were there, they'd have to really be able to say whether they're willing to be one film. We also need to make sure that it doesn't inhibit people asking questions, because for some people it will encourage questions, it will encourage reporting, for others it will stop them coming and asking questions. So we need to play that balance, and I will be discussing that both with the board and with the Council of Governors as to how we progress. Thank you very much for raising it. We will consider it.
So I've just come out of the meeting which was held at Hitchingbrook Country Park, and when we came out we were thrown into pitch darkness down there with no street lights or anything, and quite uneven paths and people driving out. It was quite difficult to get out of the meeting. Also had some problems when I went into the meeting. The first thing I experienced was an officer who put his arm across my chest and tried to stop me from going in. I then went through a pre-rehearsed plan as to what I would do if I was stopped like that physically by officers. Is I immediately walked away from the officer. The officer kept walking towards me, so I had to use crash bars to get out of the room, and I walked rapidly out of the room and away from the meeting venue. The officer then came out. I went to talk to him, keeping a safe distance, about what he was doing and why, and eventually I then went back into the meeting again. The public seating was actually at the far end of the room, so it wasn't near any entrances or exits. So it's actually very difficult for members of the public who might want to leave for any reason, or go to the loo or get a drink of water or anything throughout the meeting. Now it took over 3 hours, I think, for public questions on items that weren't on the agenda to be reached, and that's a very long time for people to wait, especially when people aren't expecting to wait for that long. Like, can you manage not to go to the loo for that long? Do you manage without food or water? And people might have been working for a hard day before coming to a meeting like this. And actually, some members of the public said that they had to leave after they'd been waiting for a couple of hours. And I think some of them actually were intending to ask public questions. But as it was, I was the only person who actually stayed there till the end, and was actually able to ask public questions at the end. I put my 2 questions. I was able to raise the issues at Garden Walk, and I got quite a good response, which I've got on film. Ultimately, though, they're saying some of the officers were keen to say that this is possibly just 1 or 2 individuals, and it might not be a systemic issue, but then other members of the governing body were keen to see, and what I suggested, which is a report to see if there is a systemic problem with the allocation of accommodation to people who need supported accommodation due to their mental health conditions. I was also able to raise the question about the ban on electronic devices recording. The chair said that she would consider what to do about that, and perhaps put that to the governing body in the future. So those were 2 reasonably good things that I got out of my participation in the meeting. One member of the public, when I went back to the public seats, actually said that my contribution was one of the most interesting bits of the meeting. So overall, I was pretty surprised that we didn't have a lot of substance. We didn't have a lot of performance information about the services that the Trust provide. There was an awful lot of, well, essentially just junk. Time was spent discussing the design of a logo for a charity which the Trust is going to set up, and even the design guides of how it should be used on badges and business cards. There was, and then there was a really bizarre section that could have come straight out of the sitcom W1A. It was all about what's the difference between quality improvement and improving quality. I sat through that presentation. I couldn't tell you the difference. I do get the idea that there's lots of management speak, and the idea being that when they've got problems, they're going to have a meeting, think about how they might solve the problems, and trial on a small scale the solutions, which is of course great stuff. But they could just say that instead of all the nonsense that I and a few other members of the public and the governors and officers sat through this evening. Some of the interesting bits were talking about the Sustainability and Transformation Partnership. The Chief Executive here at CPFT is also the Chief Officer of the Sustainability and Transformation Partnership, and she said that the problems with actually having one budget and how that one budget system works are still to be addressed. There were some really good quotes from that, which of course I don't have on camera, but I do have them written down, and I shall tweet them later. We heard from the financial report that the body had just received, I think it was £800,000 CPFT has got to deal with the Sustainability and Transformation Partnership, but they weren't able to spend that, so all that did was increase their surplus by £800,000 last year. They also talked about not being able to spend charitable donations as well, which is quite an unusual statement, but this is something that they hope to be able to fix when they get their new charity launched on the 10th of October with a launch event, which I've commented on before. It's a bit odd. It's for their staff and I think it's for members of the public as well. And anyway, it's just a bit of an odd event at the Imperial War Museum at Duxford. So overall, it's an experience getting to see how our local NHS works, and I think me coming along was useful this evening. So now I'm going to go back home to Cambridge, and when I do get home, either tonight or tomorrow, I'm going to go through my pages of notes that I took during those 3 hours, and I have highlighted some things I want to tweet. So my tweets would have been live and much easier. If I had permission to use an electronic device, I'd have used my phone, I'd have tweeted what was happening, and that would all be done. Now I've got to go and put another few hours into interpreting my notes, making sense of them, and writing the tweets. I do keep looking around because there have been sort of people walking around, and I just pay attention to my surroundings. Someone was kind of had a phone out their window for some reason. Anyway, interesting. I've never seen the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Foundation Trust, our local mental health trust, as governing body in operation before, so I can add that to the list of organisations which run our society locally that I've now seen and observed firsthand in person. Right.